G'day guys, welcome to Lessons from the Legends. We've got 100 of the greatest fighters of all time, and this video we're going through chronologically, but I just happen to be talking about the man who in my opinion is the greatest fighter of all time, with the greatest record of all time, the greatest number of dominant wins over great opponents, often who are much bigger than he is. Harry Greb, the Pittsburgh Windmill. If I had to pick the greatest fighter of all time, it is Harry Greb, and that is boxer, kickboxer, MMA, mixed martial artists, covering all bases. This middleweight who beat practically every top middleweight in dominant fashion at the time, practically every light heavyweight in dominant fashion at the time, almost every heavyweight at the time in dominant fashion, Harry Greb. And he was known as someone who was just a constant barrage of punches. He was incredibly fast, had insane cardio, and this is sort of emphasis of like with power, not quite as important, especially when you're taking on the bigger guys. Like once everyone's kind of getting to like a similar sort of size, like even Harry Greb wasn't that big, but you know, he's 5'8". He fought at around, 165 pounds, typically through most of the latter half of his career. Again, not a big guy, but still enough. Even his lighter punches were enough to at least do damage, and he has a lot of very one-sided decision wins where he brutally dismantles his opponents. And boy, where do we start with Harry Greb? As far as a career goes, I'll leave that for another video if you guys do want it, if we want a deep dive on who, in my opinion, is the greatest fighter of all time. For what it's worth, the other two, I think, would be two other boxers, because boxing is by far the biggest martial art in history. And it would be next to Muhammad Ali, Sam Langford. They're the other two. Ali with a bit of a caveat, because he was sort of taken out of boxing for over 3 years. His boxing license was revoked. So that was kind of unfortunate for him, but even before and after the suspension, still had enough amazing performances against top quality opponents for me to include him in there. So with Greb, we're going to start talking about taking dominant angles. And this is something where I'll just stick with this as the mindset in boxing. So with the mindset in boxing of just trying to take a dominant angle on your opponent, so you are facing them, but they're not facing you. That is an excellent mindset to take when you're taking on anyone, and that also applies for when you're grappling. This is sort of like beginning to go into like, okay, so you're aiming to take the back when you're grappling, very similar to trying to take their back in boxing and stand-up fighting. Although typically with boxing, you're just trying to get to the side of their opponent, because you have to be pretty damn quick to get fully around to the outside of their opponent and facing their back before they can even turn around to face you. But it's a win if you can just get side on. If you're facing them and they're side on to you, you can strike them, they can't strike you. It's a great mindset to have, and it's something with Harry Greb, with his incredible speed, footwork, and cardio, was very, very good at doing. So one example of that is basically Greb would throw a lot of jabs to the body, and he would basically dart in and out with this jab to the body. So he would jab to the body. As he would jab, he would level change. So he's not punching down to the body and leaving his face exposed. He is keeping that arm up, keeping that chin down. And also, just to be safe, slipping to the outside as well. Then he would step back in. Then he would come back in with a big right hand over the top. That was a fairly typical attack of Harry Greb. And from there, that's when the angles would begin. So from there, from that right hand, then he would often switch stance. So the very first video we did on the legendary Bob Fitzsimmons is where we talked about stance switching for the first time. He could then, after throwing that right hand, he could then switch stance, which means from here, he's leaning down towards his left after throwing the right hand at his opponent. He would then step forward with his right foot. Now his right foot is his lead, and now suddenly with that pivot with his left foot, he's now side on with his opponent. His opponent just recovered. He's just been hit with a right hand, and now Harry Greb can come through with a left hook, which is now going in between their guard, because he is standing side on to his opponent. So that hook is coming through right in between their guard. Very standard sort of setup and combination from Harry Greb. And from there, the angles would keep on changing. But that's one example of how to get the dominant angle. Is basically constantly changing up where you are to your opponent, and then finally releasing the step, which changes stance with your right foot, pivoting with your left foot, and now you're facing your opponent from side on. And from here, you can do something that Mike Tyson was very successful at as well. It's getting that dominant angle and throwing the left hook in between their guard. Boy, there's a lot we could take from Harry Greb, but if nothing else, in my opinion, the greatest fighter who has ever lived so far. I hope in my lifetime I can say that he's a second and have someone else come along who is even better. You never know, there could be a young fighter training now who might take that mantle from him, but he's held it now, in my opinion, he passed away, unfortunately, before he retired through eye surgery as he was going fully blind. And again, eventually he needed surgery to correct his nose, which had been broken many times, the joys of being a boxer. And that is ironically what actually made him, caused him to pass away in one of the biggest tragedies in boxing history. They had this amazing boxer pass away, but not after at least getting what, in my opinion, is the greatest career in boxing history covered by the time he was 30 years old. Absolutely amazing. Harry Greb, and an absolute flurry of speed, footwork, and taking dominant angles on his opponent to completely bamboozle and beat them up for the extent of entire fights. I could talk about him all day. There's a few of these great boxers where I'm like, I need to stop. So we'll get into the next lesson from a legend, but very much enjoyed talking about it. For me, the greatest boxer of all time, the greatest fighter of all time, Pittsburgh Windmill, Harry Greb.